You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. the live stream. Detroit is different in BridgeDetroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back to another episode of Public Comment. I am Khary Frazier from Detroit is Different, and now we talking budget, but a couple of people that's going to help me get through this municipal budget for 2025, 2026. If you don't know, now you're about to find out a whole lot more. Starting off with Malachi Barrett. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good morning. I feel like I have a maybe not a master's degree, maybe like an associate's degree in Detroit budgeting after watching this the last month, but I think it's revealed a lot of really interesting little tidbits of information that I'm excited to dive into.
I can only imagine. And also, new anchor of this and added so much flavor to last week's episode. So make sure you check out Public Comment as it goes. And now I feel like a point guard. It's like I can just pass the ball. Thomaesa Bailey, how are you from We Own Everything?
Good morning, Khary. I am doing well, and I'm happy to be here yet again. I'm ready to dive into the budget. I mean, as you guys know, the budget is a priority document. It's a values document, so I'm ready to unpack what happened.
It is a whole lot to, you use the term unpack. It is a lot to unpack. So with that, let's get on into this. All right. So Public Comment, you already know what's shaping $3 billion budget 2025-26. This is Mayor Duggan's final budget before leaving office. So it's a lot about like land bank funding and much more. This is just a cool introduction, but let's get on into a little bit of this. So a good overview, total budget, $3.03 billion, up from $3.018 billion of the proposed budget from the mayor originally. So general fund, discretionary, $1.58 billion, income tax, $432 million, casino taxes, $292 million, property taxes, $174 million, state revenue sharing, $253 million. All right, 1 second. Let me say something like this. Seems like that should be a little bit more, but we'll jump back into that, right? So legacy pension obligation, $173 million, rainy day fund, $150 million, and also retiree protection fund, $455 million, right? So when we think about the budget, that's where a lot of that goes because people already took a hit years back. And right now, with everything going on federally, and a lot of people thinking, okay, is all of this goofy stuff federally going to impact my Social Security? Past city workers are really thinking about that, right? And full-time employees, 11,388, right? It's up to 25 more full-time employees. And actually, City Council had a couple of notes about how we can expand what they're doing in their office so they make sure that they're executing a whole lot within that. Just off of the overview, Malachi, you got something to say? Thomaesa, you got something to say? Let's go. I don't know. Where are we going?
It's a lot of money, is I guess what we we can say. $3 billion budget is pretty wild. Only about half of it is in the general fund and is like discretionary money that can be touched and changed, which we're going to get into more of like how the city council adjusted those funding amounts. But I think that's important to note that like a lot of this is tied up, can't be moved around. There's a limited amount of like impact this the city council actually has over, this massive pool of money.
Yes, a lot of this is so that like the services we have continue to stay. I don't know if you want to add something to that, Thomaesa. Add a little bit of flavor.
Yeah, so a lot of it is so that we can keep the city, moving in the direction that it's going in now. A lot of this stuff is not discretionary. A lot of this stuff has to be paid for, city services, people's salaries, things of that nature. One of the things that stood out to me when going over the key figures was where the revenue comes from. Income tax is now the highest revenue generator in the city. Property tax is a lot lower than income tax. So just looking at all of those numbers is really interesting about, where our taxes are going and how much we're getting taxed on certain things, because that's really important too, to kind of figure out not only where the money is going, but where it's coming from as well, because citizens are essentially paying for this through their tax dollars. So I thought that was really interesting.
We were joking before the show about not doing any math, but I think the income tax generates triple basically what comes out of property taxes, which is really interesting because it used to be property taxes were like the main source of income for the city.
Mhm.
When we were such a strong kind of homeowner city,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's really, and I think this has been reflected in kind of the Duggan era. He's talked about the strategy of trying to bring jobs into the city because it boosts the income tax. And for as much as like the property tax burdens people, and there's ongoing conversations about finding ways to reduce the property tax millage, and even this budget includes a slight reduction in the millage. People will probably save around $100-$200 off their tax bill this year, so not anything too crazy, but we're trying to cut that, and yet it's a pretty small, relatively smaller than other sources of income. I just think that's a really interesting dynamic too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you look at it, when you think about what the advocates are saying and what people are talking about, you would think that property tax would be the primary revenue generator, but it's actually income tax, which is interesting.
Yep. So with that, let's jump into a little bit of this politics and power shifts. Duggan's last budget. Obviously, Council President Sheffield and Councilmember Fred Durrell are running for mayor. ARPA funding, 14.5 million. Now, council discretion. Of that was like one of those interesting things. So 5 million is going to homelessness, and each council member will have a million discretion to put into programs that already exist. So don't go to your council member and think to yourself that like you're going to be able to get going what your great idea is per se, but it will support what already has been in action. Also, a lot under, I was looking at this, it's like the Financial Review Commission. So this is definitely one of those things that happen post bankruptcy where a lot of the state is looking at how the city of Detroit is spending its money, and the city is saying like, no, we need to manage this ourselves, stay out of our business. We already know how we can watch over this. I thought that was very interesting. Questions about this, how can Detroiters hold council and the next mayor accountable for financial independence? So those are the kind of questions I got for you all. Like, what do you all think that residents and voters could be more active and participatory in this act and have say beyond just showing up for public comment? Because we got something later on, hence public comment, talking about where residents were present. How would you suggest people can be more inserted in this process, Thomaesa?
That is a really great question because I think with public comment, and individuals are already have the ability to call down and say and look at how the city is actually spending the money. It's like we know what we've been through, right? We know what happened to us. We know what went on. And so we really need to be careful and have a watchful eye over what's happening. And I think a lot of Detroiters already use the power of public comment to do that. But speaking to your legislators directly, speaking to your city council people, letting them know that, the financial well-being of the city is important to you, and just trying to remain in those conversations with the city and to keep that issue uplifted is going to be really, really important. And it's going to take Detroiters to do it because we don't want people in those positions of power just kind of doing whatever they want to do willy-nilly. We have to be involved in those conversations because we don't want to see history repeat itself.
All right. So when you talk about getting involved in these conversations, public safety and policing, this is always something big. So the Shot Stoppers program, $3 million to that, which I'm sure more is looking to be, as you talk about speaking to your legislator, advocated for in Lansing. Actually, I saw a conference. It came across my queue between Matt Hall and Mayor Duggan about, I'm sure they were discussing some of what this would look like. As we know, the more legislators outside the Detroit get their hands on it, it's gonna look different, but we still good to see that that's continuing. And also a new office proposed for Office of Violence Prevention under non-departmental. So this means that this will be outside of the police department. So I think that also opens up some lens for what this could be. Malachi, can you talk a little bit to what that was happening during all of the hours and hours of budget hearing when it comes to public safety?
Yeah, it was something. And I guess I want to also just kind of flag for people like the amount of like mental stamina it takes for council members to work through this. I mean, I was going back and last night as I was putting my newsletter together, I wanted to get some more clarity on the ARPA conversation, and so I went back and listened to about 45 minutes of their conversation out of, I mean, 100 plus hours probably of like overall discussion, and just the amount of like things that they're juggling and have to keep track of. It's crazy that people they can keep all that in their head at one time. So I just want to like flag that, like, the mental load of all of that is a lot. And it's crazy how much gets decided within a relatively short period of time. The public safety conversation around the Shot Stoppers community violence intervention program was really interesting, because there was kind of a debate between Sheffield and Durhal about what kind of pressure can Detroit put on the legislature to pass this bill to appropriate this money that would be spread out not only to Detroit, across the whole state for different public safety initiatives. I think it's like a pool of $75 million. Detroit would get about 18. They would put that into these CVI groups that have shown undeniable success, I guess I would say, in reducing shootings in some of the highest crime parts of the city where they're operating. So Detroit wants to expand that program, make it a national model. They need state help to do that. The problem is that was one of the bills that died in the lame duck session of last year, the kind of the lame duck catastrophe under the leadership of Joe Tate, the former House Speaker of Detroit. And now the new House Speaker, Matt Hall, who's a Republican from, like, I think Calhoun County, West Michigan, is kind of the champion of Detroit public safety initiatives. If you ask Mike Duggan, they held a press conference and kind of a roundtable discussion. Part of it was open press, part of it was just a conversation between the Speaker's office and law enforcement and city officials. But Duggan has been very complimentary of Hall's leadership, and particularly on this issue. And there's a lot of confidence that it will pass the House, and then the question is, will it pass the Michigan Senate? We have two chambers that legislation has to get through, and there's going to be some debates over putting some police accountability measures in that bill. Anyway, all that is to say, it's a new kind of partnership with Lansing under this Republican majority. Duggan, who's running for governor as an independent, is showing some of his bipartisan leanings, I think, by holding this, and maybe subtly shading Joe Tate as well. But that fund is going to be really important because, to get back to the city council argument, the debate was whether we leave a hole in the budget to say, Lansing, we need you to help us fill this hole in our CVI program budget, or do we fully fund it and just say, if they give us money, great, but we're going to move forward on this. And ultimately, they did put a little bit of money into it. But to really get that expansion, we still need that help from the state.
And I'm guessing, watch Detroit Next, also between BridgeDetroit and Detroit is Different. Great interview with Fred Durrell, and he was just speaking about his ability and confidence in the relationship he has with Lansing, that Lansing will work it out. So I'm guessing that Councilmember Fred Durrell was saying, like, nah, we could probably work with Lansing. We have relationships in Lansing, and
he was basically saying,
moving forward.
He was basically saying, we can't pressure Lansing. They're the big sumo wrestler in the room, and we're the skinny kid. Instead of the other way around. In that, I think there was a sense among Sheffield and some of the other council members that they can push Lansing on this issue, and he was kind of like, no. Lansing does what it wants. We need to protect ourselves by funding this program and then go from there. Generally, though, he does talk about
and I was going to say that's so interesting, because in the interview that we had, he was just talking about, like, with development and everything he needs to get done in Lansing, that he would be the person that has, he's Mr. Lansing, because he knows a lot of people that were state reps that are now state senators, and it can be a fluid relationship. So I guess that's recognizing possibly the
limits of that. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe there's a difference too between partnering and pressuring, I guess. I mean, I'd be interested to hear him talk more about that.
Yeah, because to my knowledge, or to my estimation, it's not necessarily pressuring. I mean, it's Lansing. What we're talking about here is the state legislature. So that is a legislative body where advocacy is actually welcomed. And so if city lawmakers actually have something that they want state lawmakers to look at or think about or fund, then there's space to go there and ask them about that and to testify and things of that nature. So I don't necessarily see that as pressure, but I do. I do think that there's space for the city to try to fund CVI programs on their own without having to interact with Lansing, because, as to Member Durhal's point, these are independent people in Lansing. They don't necessarily have to pass this funding if they don't want to. Now, of course, we can advocate, we can go there, we can talk to people, we can use our relationships and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, they get their own vote. So I do recognize the need to want to have some funding at the city level as well, because you don't know what state legislators are going to do, especially when these CVI programs are really important for places like Detroit and inner city places and urban centers. But somebody from, Western Michigan or, the Upper Peninsula, we don't know how they're going to feel about that, right? And so they could just be like, oh, that's a Detroit thing, I don't need to deal with that. So we do have to think about that as well.
Well, I'm going to definitely say this as a former truck driver in Michigan. Michigan is definitely a lot more Blue Lives Matter than Black Lives Matter. You know what I'm saying? If you get the hint. So definitely police oversight. That's something that I see a lot of counties like Kent County and Calhoun saying, having some issues with. So housing, this is another one of those big things. And the Land Bank Authority. You're going to get some information about authorities coming from public comment very, very soon from Thomaesa. And the Land Bank Authority cut to zero. That was big. Mayor Duggan said, let's cut it in half, right? Also, Community Land Trust Fund, other money into the home repair program, and the buyback program. But the biggest thing is the Land Bank Authority. I thought that has been, since the bankruptcy, when we think about the impacts from bankruptcy in the city of Detroit, that right there is like the, what was that? It's if the Chicago Bulls of the 90s, that's like the Michael Jordan of it, to say the least. So it exists. It's still here. Zero funding there. And it's so interesting because it's such a shell of itself and what it was. And really it stands right now for a lot of the vacant lots, which that still can be a big issue. Malachi, speak to this.
Yeah, so the land bank still has money. This is just a subsidy that the city gives the land bank every year. And the reason why city council felt comfortable zeroing out this funding is because the land bank has like $30 million in a reserve fund and like 20 something $million in another fund. And so collectively they've got about $53 million that they can, they can spend on their budget. And there was some frustration, I think, from land bank officials in some of the conversations about this. They didn't feel like it was maybe that fiscally responsible to dip into their savings, but the city's like, we're giving you money every year and you don't really need it. So it's time to, sustain yourself, and we use that money elsewhere. And of course, this is in the context of, there's no operating agreement between the city and the land bank right now, as the council has not renewed that agreement for going on. Are we close to 2 years now? I think basically they're waiting for the next mayor to get in office, and then I think those negotiations will resume. It's in the context of a very public social media battle between the city and the land bank, and I think his name's Charles Brooks, right, the owner of the kind of castle-like structure on the east side, who's been posting videos and Instagram reels of land bank officials, serving him a lawsuit. And the broader just frustrations in general that people have with the land bank. People are mad at the land bank for lots of reasons. So I thought it was really notable that the city, I think this is a signal of the council and the city leadership kind of rethinking the future of the land bank and trying to figure out what is its place when, most of the inventory has been sold off. Duggan feels like, I think that, the entire inventory will be sold off early next year. So what really is the future of this thing moving forward? Council President Sheffield has talked about, let's shift a lot of these operations and programs into the housing department and other departments. And actually there were recommendations that the council made in its closing resolution, which is a kind of wish list of things that didn't get funding. And a lot of it there were several items that had to do with shifting control of land bank programs over to the city. And, she's talked about, maybe we end this, which I think is a fairly popular idea among people that call into city council. So yeah, this is something I would say it signals the winds are turning. What does that mean for the future? It's gonna be interesting to watch.
Definitely. Space.
I agree. I mean, I think if there's anywhere in this budget that is a direct response to people's anger, it's this getting rid of this city council subsidy for the land bank. I mean, people call in with all sorts of stories about how the land bank took their house and how the land bank is, giving them these unreasonable deadlines. And so I think city council has felt the pressure to respond to a lot of that. And I think it's really interesting that, people are saying that this is a signal of getting rid of the land bank because there's, members on council who've been trying to say, let's get rid of the land bank for a really long time. And what purpose does the land bank actually serve besides, generating consternation for people and causing, stress for folks? So we have to look at that as well. I mean, Detroit has come a long way. The land bank has come a long way in its mission of disposing of land and things of that nature. And so as we look to the future and also look at all these complaints and all these issues, and we have to kind of figure out, what is the future of this entity that has been causing so many problems or, people's perceived problems in the city. And I think that the council is just trying to respond to that. And I think that was a good thing.
Oh, definitely. I can already see the political ads that this is going to be. I'm just messing with you, but it's probably going to end up there as well. But this is definitely where people advocating and seeing how things will function. I'm really now getting into the plunder book. Eesh. Whew. A lot in that. Also, we spoke about this, so I'm gonna kind of go through this slide because we spoke so much about transit last week and what was happening. And it kind of stands the same. The $16 million increase, a lot of the increase to the budget that is discretionary really went into transit. The other thing uplifted that Malachi spoke to is that the bus drivers will be up for negotiation. So keeping in negotiation when you already know that they've been advocating for more money, I'm sure that this is going to be a tough situation because adding to the fleet and keeping the fleet up to date, and also making sure that the drivers are paid something fair and not necessarily poached from some of the other regional transit authorities around here. That's going to be a dance. Also, even beforehand, we were talking about the bus materials. There's some fabric seats. Let's not have fabric seats because sometimes fabric is not the best in public transit options, right? So now we're looking at like a lot of the other equity when we really looked at the budget and what will be shared. A lot more so into the lead hazard mitigation. Still a lot going on with what's happening in reference to that with the water, which people still say may not necessarily be enough money. Some voter education. For the clerk's office, the clerk's been doing a lot of that. And then also city council was really pushing for some other special projects into as I like how Malachi said that, like what did not get funded and what could be the wish list. Student skilled trade pipeline, that was big. Council member Durhal spoke to that on his Detroit Next because that's still one of those challenges. I'm just speaking myself from all the work that's been going on like all month on my block that has been causing all types of problems for my whole street. And I think that between the tree trimming and the concrete laying and the concrete ripping, I think I saw one black person working, one in my own neighborhood, and I swear I've at least counted like about crews of like 16 different people. Now I know this is a mix between MDOT and DTE, but it's still a lot of city sanctioning that was needed that I know was not necessarily approved. So really making sure that this work is met. You can look in the Creo and where that stands, but definitely not clear. It's a lot of people that are willing to work and looking for work, but they're not even working within our own community. So when we think about some of those outside counties, and I think that some of these people that work in Detroit need to be paying more income tax in Detroit. That's a Khary Frazier stance, right? But it's just real because it's opportunities that are just so abundant throughout Detroit that aren't coming to Detroiters. And that's going to be spoke about more and more and more and more often on these campaign trails. And usually that's led with these people just don't know. They don't have the skill sets. These people can't get the jobs, or God knows what. It's like chicken and egg. So how does that function? I believe like really I need to see an apprentice next to every person with a jackhammer and something going on. That's a Khary thought, because it needs to happen, because it extracts and it hits you even harder when you're dealing with everything else surrounding you. With that all being said, that's more so a wrap of the slides. Malachi, bring us home for just like the overall tone of where do you think this budget was? It definitely seemed to be more of this sanctimonious, because this also frames between mayor and council. And in it's not the back and forth like it has been in certain years and definitely years prior. What's your tone of how this budget went through between council and mayor, and how were the people that were present reflective of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was some goodwill offered from the mayor in this budget between the DDOT funding and the ARPA funding that was handed over to the council, which is a big deal because the council has been really pushing for more control over how that huge pot of $827 million is used. A previous version of the council approved a spending plan that was put together in COVID. It was like early COVID, and so there was some concerns about how much does this plan kind of line up with what people actually want, and maybe it could be adjusted in the future. So they were finally given a little say in how to use that money. Now, again, it can't be used to create new programs, like you were saying. It has to basically boost the existing programs. So I'm curious to see what it's going to be used for. But it seems like housing is kind of the big issue that council members feel like didn't get enough funding in this budget. So they were talking about some different ways to use that money for shelters, for maybe some down payments, some kind of connections to get people in homes long term.
And of that, I do have to add this. This is where federal politics do impact local politics, as I'm building my garden beds, and the price of wood is just going up, 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 and up. So the price of all these other materials will continue to go up. So a lot of the roof repair and porch repair that already was uplifted, that doesn't have enough money, with a lot of what's happening federally with these tariffs, it's frustration. But Malachi,
it also is a showcase, I think, for the next who wants to be the next mayor. In that, you've got Mary Sheffield leading the budget process as council president. You got Fred Durhal, who's also running for mayor, who is the chair of the budget committee, who had a pretty loud voice in this. They had an almost equal number of requests to make changes to the budget. The city council overall, basically, their list of requested changes was twice as big as it normally is, or at least has been in the last couple of years. So I think there was a real opportunity here for those two candidates to kind of show that they have the political savvy and the deal making ability, I guess, to bring funding back to their districts, and to get council priorities funded in general. And we saw at times there were some kind of tensions between council members as they were trying to find money for these various things, because they're all kind of pit against each other. There's a limited amount of money to go around. At one point they talked about just splitting the available funding 9 ways and going from there. They ultimately decided not to do that. But overall, I think it was it wasn't like a chaotic budget process or anything like that. If you were watching these meetings, like, there were some momentary kind of battles, but overall the council seemed to come together, and their list of issues in the closing resolution, I think, lays out kind of what is left undone and the things that they want to work on next. And I'll flag one thing about the public's participation. There was a proposal to create a participatory budgeting process, which would basically give residents a lot more say. It would give them the ability to vote on it. Would basically, the way this works in other cities and parts of the country that use participatory budgeting. Sorry, that's a mouthful. They take a portion of the budget and they say this is kind of up to the public's discretion. The public has more control over this portion of the budget, and then there's a engagement process and a voting process to decide how that money will be used. And council members expressed support for creating this model for future budget years. And in this list of recommendations, it talks about how giving residents a direct say in how public dollars are spent not only builds trust in government, but also leads to more responsive, equitable investments in our neighborhoods. And so I think we saw this year more participation in the budget process. But the important thing is that needs to start early, because by the time the mayor has made his recommended, by the time he presents his recommendations to the council, a lot of that is not set in stone, but pretty well, it's hard to change basically. So if we change to this model of participatory budgeting, it ideally would give the public a better voice in the process. And so that did not receive any funding, but I think that's going to be something to watch moving forward.
So with that, I definitely, Thomaesa, this is all up your alley. I want to uplift a couple different things. It's not much discretionary that the council can spend. So I can only imagine what the people would have control over in that. Because if you don't understand the structure of this city and the way that Detroit is chartered through Michigan, this is a very strong executive city, meaning that the mayor controls so much of what happens in the city of Detroit. Like so much of what happens in the city of Detroit. The one thing the city council really has is the budget, right? And these ordinances, and even how it's packaged and how it functions. And when I think about the expansive nature of what's happened to the executive office under Mayor Duggan, it's expanded a lot in departments and people and positions. So it's a lot to look at. So classic, Detroit is different, long-winded question. What would that look like, Thomaesa? And also with it, just I guess an overview of this process and like how people can be more involved. You spoke a little bit to this earlier, but where does that stand?
Yeah, so I think participatory budgeting is a great idea. I think one of the examples that I would lift up is something that Malachi mentioned, is that the mayor actually gave city council some of the ARPA money to use, for existing programs. I mean, some of those programs are, home repairs for seniors and things like that are already getting ARPA funding. So giving the city council, who is, closest to the people, who understand what's going on in their districts, some opportunity to use discretionary money to fund programs that are already being funded by ARPA, I think is a really great idea. And that's the same thing that goes for citizens. If there was a pot of money where citizens could say, hey, I need this for my community. We need alley cleanups. We need this, we need that. I think that would be a great thing to add, because I feel like citizens do need to be more involved in the budget process, because the budget is where the rubber meets the road, right? It's where we see the funding that's actually going to go into our communities. And so I think that would be outstanding if citizens could vote and actually know for a fact that that thing that they voted for is going to be included in the budget. I think if people are going to be earnest about it, if it's going to be a real thing and it's not just going to be a rubber stamp or a show, I think that it would be like one of the things that would change the game in terms of the budget process here in the city. But then also you have to think about the discretionary funding as well. Like, as you lifted up, Khary, there's not that much discretionary funding to actually play with. Like we said, this is the mayor's budget. The first thing that we do during budget season is the mayor comes down and says, hey, these are my budget priorities. City council can only, change so much of that. So what are the citizens going to be able to change, right? But we have to make sure that it's a genuine process if we're going to have people believe in it and actually participate. But I think if that would be the case, then I think it would be a good thing.
All right. And also with it, this budget this year, what stood out to you, Thomaesa? What was the thing that really was like, this is interesting?
No, we talked about it. I think the land bank subsidy going away completely, instead of going down by half, which is what Mayor Duggan had suggested, was really interesting. Because the land bank is one of those entities that people talk about all the time. So that really stood out to me, and that this might be a signal for some type of major change in the way that we look at the land bank. I mean, the land bank is a public authority. They do have a lot of autonomy. They do have, revenue generating operations that they take on. But the city council is responding to what they have heard about the land bank. And I think that, that was really, really a big signifying thing to happen during this budget season. That really stood out to me.
All right. So with that, this is a rare one for public comment. I'm previewing what we're talking about next week.
Uh-oh.
Even before what Malachi wrote. Because
can I flag one thing real quick?
Yes.
Community land trust in the slide, mentioned it got $3.7 million. This is, I think, something really to watch moving forward, because council members talked about this could be a way to give neighborhoods more autonomy over the development that happens, and also create more affordable housing. There are a handful of organizations already that are working on land trusts. I think there's a couple in Corktown. There's one on the east side. with some churches around Mac. And I think there's some others, the Detroit Justice Center. There's a coalition of groups basically that are working on this. I think this is the first time the city's put funding toward it. And it's not really clear to me exactly how that's going to be used. But I think that's, in a city where affordable housing is so important, I think that's going to be interesting to see what happens.
All right. I love you uplifted that. And then I can give you all the quick definition from Attorney Adams. Check the archives of Detroit is different. So a community land trust, if you can kind of get this, and this kind of goes into what we're talking about next week. We're going to deep dive into this one because it slid during the budget. But this is a community land trust. When you buy a home, right, usually the land itself is somewhere between 30 to 40% of the value of the home, right? So if we gathered the land and we bought the land collectively as a group, as an entity that has this community land trust, then now you're paying for the property that sits on the land inside the land trust, which is making the price of your purchase for your home and staying in that home, even as a renter, if you're doing all of that, a lot less. That is why a community land trust could be very empowering and how it's been executed throughout the nation for years. With that, obviously, this takes a collective group that believes in a lot of core values and can succeed what is going to happen with this and how those things function. And also, I've been reading, shout out to Erin, my lady. She shared the information of the Black Farmer Land Fund looking at exploring this option where it wouldn't necessarily have to run all together and continuous, meaning basically I can have my lot over here on the west side. Thomaesa got her lot further on the west side, and then Malachi got his on the east side, and we all are a part of the same land trust. It's even ways to look at and explore that. With this being explored, it's going to take a lot of focus, which this is what I'm previewing for next year. Next week, not next year. Next week's public comment, we definitely have to talk about the report that finally came in way after fact. We got to talk about what's happening with the property tax. And we even uplifted like property tax isn't so much, and it's not so much because so many people lost their properties. You know what I'm saying? So the Bureau did provide that report. It was during obviously the budgeting process. So our focus was over here and not necessarily over there. This really lays at the feet of the mayor big time because the mayor has been consistently saying that nobody's overassessed in taxes. And this report has come back and it's come back saying people are still overassessed in taxes here. And the people that have the least, meaning that the homes that are worth, quote unquote, the least are overassessed in taxes the most. This becomes a very key thing, I think, moving forward throughout this political season because it's so much uplifted and it's the mayor that's now running for governor. And we also have 2 council members that are running for mayor. And a lot of the council members are running for re-election as well. I think everybody's running for re-election.
Yep.
So this is going to be powerful. So I'm just previewing this because it kind of ran across me when I was talking to somebody else that like, no, the report came in. I was like, for real?
I got to read it still. I got a copy of it sitting on my desk, but it's a lot. It's a lot of pages. So yeah,
that I can tell you. That's what we're talking about. Send me a copy of that too. Send one.
You got it.
We're gonna send one to Thomaesa too. I'm sure it's gonna be a hefty read. But that's what we're talking about next week because and I can't wait to even read Malachi's perspective of that one. So, Thomaesa, you got something to say on that one?
No, I just look forward to reading the report. And then if the report is saying that people are still being overassessed to this day, that just makes me think about the whole issue of double taxation, where we're paying high income tax in the city as well as property tax in the city. So if you're a Detroit resident, you pay income tax and property tax. So that's a lot of taxation, especially now in light of a report that says people are still being overassessed. So this is going to be real interesting.
Yes, and I think this leads not just into the Detroit mayoral election, this now leads into the gubernatorial election. Because I'm pretty sure, as I saw the good Republican John James is threw his hat in the ring for the gubernatorial seat, and I'm sure that this will not go unspoken when it comes to what that looks like as Mayor Duggan is running for governor. With that being said, I'm Khary for Detroit is Different. Malachi, talk to the people.
BridgeDetroit.com, free information you can use, hopefully. If you're interested in the budget, we got so much coverage for you. We covered every budget hearing. It was been the focus of, I don't know, maybe like the last 3 or 4 stories that I've done that are just on the site immediately. So go subscribe to my newsletter. It comes out Wednesdays and then other various times when I decided to do more than one. And, there's always stuff in there that we don't get to talk about on the show. So definitely dive into that. It's free. It shows up in your inbox every week. And subscribe to our new podcast platform where we are talking to city council and mayoral candidates. We have an interview with Santil Jenkins coming up. So we're working our way through the list of the mayoral field. And I think each of those conversations has revealed something about the candidates themselves. So hopefully they've been useful for people.
Thomaesa.
We own everything. A political consulting company specializing in political education. Follow me on Instagram at we_own_ everything, where I'm sharing political tidbits, political education, and happy to be a part of public comment to uplift advocacy and advocate voices, as well as talk more about the legislative process and how a lot of this stuff works. So I'm glad to be here to bring my perspective.
Peace. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is Different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.